Mississippi State, sports in general, movies, television, video games, and so much more. In the words of the great Julie Andrews, these are a few of my favorite things, and that's what I'll be talking about. This is the Justin Strawn Podcast. Welcome back to the Justin Strawn Podcast. I am returning to an older podcast that I did and started back probably about halfway through the Mississippi State season. So I'm coming back to this little platform. I had kind of taken a break from it because I wanted to just cover like singular movies at a time, and I was doing that on reel to reel. And while I enjoy doing that, it really kind of limited what I wanted to talk about. And there's so much going on in the world of Mississippi State sports in general, and movies and television that I would like to branch out and discuss some of those other things. So that's one of the reasons why I'm returning to this podcast. I was doing it twice a week when I first launched it. I will try to continue to do it twice a week. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not, but I am going to make that attempt. So anyway, I appreciate everybody who has stuck around, who hasn't deleted this podcast off of their podcast players. Just as a word to the wise, I'm still going to be posting it to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of those places. But the only place I'll probably be promoting it is through the YouTube channel, because I had a lot of success with YouTube on Reel to Reel, and I'm going to try my best to continue that success over into this particular podcast. I didn't have quite as much success with this one, so I'm going to try to get the stuff I was doing with YouTube on Reel to Reel over to here. I'm on all the social media platforms. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Had a ton of success with Reel to Reel on Facebook and Instagram. Again, I'm going to do my best to try to get some of those clips and things onto there and use the same strategies with Reel to Reel here, so I can maybe possibly grow the podcast just a little bit more. So anyway, so why am I back over here on the Justin Strawn podcast platform? It boils down to a couple of things. The reason why I left, honestly, was because, let's be honest, talking about Mississippi State sports last year was kind of depressing, and I kind of abandoned it right when it became obvious that the Mississippi State baseball team wasn't going to be as good as we had hoped they would be. They were a good team last year, but they weren't as good as we thought they would be. They were a top 5 team, pretty much consensus coming into the preseason, and ended up basically being a top 20 team, a good team, but not a great team, and a team that was good but didn't quite live up to our expectations. And that was really the only thing that we were kind of hoping on going into the season. The football team gets off to a great 4-0 start last year, then they go 1-8 the rest of the way. The basketball team was a disappointment, both men's and women's. The men's team especially was a disappointment. And then when you couple all that with a underwhelming baseball season, it just wasn't a whole lot of fun to talk about Mississippi State sports. And guys, those of us who do this just on the side and don't do this as something for a living, that's not always fun to talk about. So why am I returning? Because I am hopeful this year. I have hope for this Mississippi State football team. I think there is reason to be optimistic. I think there are reasons why you can hope and pray that this team will be better than what they have been under the first 2 years with Jeff Lebby. So I'm optimistic there. I'm optimistic that with the return of Josh Hubbard and Chris James, hopefully understanding that this could be his last year as the head coach at Mississippi State if he doesn't get things turned around after this year, because the last couple of years have been disappointing, and last year especially was disappointing. You hope and pray that this will finally be the year that Mississippi State takes a little bit of a step forward in the basketball team. I haven't done as much I haven't looked into them as much. I haven't looked and seen what they did in the portal and all that kind of stuff yet. So I honestly don't know what to expect out of the Mississippi State basketball team this year, but we'll see. Also, baseball, they should be good again. The thing that kind of let them down was the thing that I was talking about before I stopped doing this podcast, and it was the pitching. The pitching just never... Look, the starters were great, and it was basically what I said throughout the entirety before I stopped covering this team. The starters were great. The bullpen was a little shakier. And next year, it should be the opposite. I mean, well, the starters should be fantastic. And when I say the opposite, last year the offense carried the pitching a lot of times, and that's not going to be the case this year. I think the pitching will be one of the best. They'll be one of the best pitching teams in the country, and they should be good offensively. I don't know if they're going to be as good as they were last year offensively, but they should still be good. But so I'm optimistic about Mississippi State this year. But more specifically, let's talk about the football team. Why am I optimistic about this football team? For a few reasons. One, this is the third year with Jeff Lebby. I think he is hopefully, I'm going to say hopefully, he has matured some and has kind of understands things. Look, he got rid of Coleman Hutzler. I was never really on board with the Jeff Lebby hire because I didn't think he was ready for this job, and he hasn't really done anything to prove me wrong. But firing Coleman Hutzler, making some changes, I think shows growth because that was his guy, that was his buddy, that was the guy he wanted as his defensive coordinator, despite the fact that he had no experience doing it, no experience coming close to being able to show that he could put a defense that competes at an SEC level on the field. He hired him anyway, and then he kept him after an absolute disaster of a first year. And while the defense was better those first few games, they were terrible the last half of the season, and it was a big reason why the Mississippi State football team lost a lot of their games in the second half of the season. So, like I said, getting rid of him and adding our former head coach and Zach Arnett, getting him back as a defensive coordinator, it gives me room for optimism. It's the reason why I think this team is going to be better, because I think the defense will just be better as a result of having a decent defensive coordinator on the field. I don't know how good this defense can be, but I think at least top 75 in the country is a realistic expectation. You say top 75 that's not that great. But it's a lot better than where they were under Coleman Hutzler. They were like 120th in the country. So just making that bit of an improvement, I think, could result in a few additional wins this year. You also have the fact that, look, the team was close last year. They were very, very close to having 3 additional wins on the board. 2 of those, you probably should say that they should have won. They should have beaten Florida. They were driving, they were within field goal range, and the stupid play call and a really bad pass ends up in an INT, and you don't kick a field goal to win the game against Florida. And then you just completely blow a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter against Texas. Those are 2 games you should have won. The Tennessee game, I'm not going to say you should have won, but you very easily could have won. They led throughout most of that game, and they just couldn't hold the lead, and then they just fall apart there in overtime. So there's 3 more wins. I mean, if you win those 3 additional games, then you're talking about a very different season for Mississippi State. You're talking about an 8-4 team going to a very different bowl if you win those games. So, like I said, I think there are reasons for optimism because this team was close on a number of occasions last year and with an improved defense. But most importantly, the reason why I am more excited is because Kamario Taylor is an electric playmaker. He is dynamic on the field, and this offense is being turned over to him. And from everything I've heard, the offensive line is better. I don't know how much better, but they're better. And with an improved offensive line, I really do believe that this team can make a step forward offensively. And Kamario he's just a unique talent, and there's a reason why he got so much publicity in the offseason about his playmaking ability, about his ability to throw the football, and just the raw potential tools that he has. There's lots of reason to be excited about this guy, and I'm excited to see what he can do. Look, we won't really know just what this team is until week 2. They should be able to beat Louisiana Monroe in week 1 very easily, but we'll really find out a lot about season 2. And about this season in game 2 against Minnesota. And let's just be honest, that's kind of where I'm at with this team. We'll know a lot about this team after game 2. Once they go up to Minnesota, a team that is a good, not great, Big Ten team, a team that is very much on par with what Mississippi State normally is, that's a game you can win. It's not a game necessarily that you should win, but it's a game you can win. And that game will tell us a lot. Let's look back at what happened in 2024 in Jeff Lebby's first year. Mississippi State, they win their first game pretty easily against an FCS opponent. And then they go to Arizona State. and they're getting trounced for basically like 2.5 quarters. They do make a comeback in the second quarter, in the second half, excuse me, but they end up coming up short in that second half, and they aren't able to put anything together to win that game. And then they get blown out by Toledo, and we kind of knew at that point that season was done. And they ended up only winning one additional game, and it was really, really bad. And I think that's going to kind of be the case this year when they travel to Minnesota. If they go up to Minnesota and they get pummeled, kind of like they did against Arizona State in 2024, and we'll probably know that the Jeff Lebby era is over, and that'll be it. So that's kind of where we are with Mississippi State. Like I said, I'm excited, but I'm afraid that it could be. I'm afraid it could be a bad year, but I'm also afraid that I think there's reason for optimism. So, like I said, I'm very interested to see what this team is going to be, because I don't know. Most years, I've been able to tell you that this team is going to be, a 6-win team, 7-win team, a 2-win team, a 3-win team. I really don't know this year. 6-6, 7-5 seems like realistic expectations, but the schedule is hard. If they get off to a bad start in these first 4 games, if they're 1-3 coming out of September, it's going to be a long year. But if they're 3-1 or if they're 4-0, it could be a great year. So, like I said, this first month of the season is going to tell us a lot, and we'll talk more about each of them as we get into those games. But for now, let's move on to other topics. All right, so recently there have been a lot of movement in the world of the law world, and basically in how it impacts the college sports world. There was originally a ruling that was passed that said any 2022 athlete was supposed to be given a 5th year of eligibility, which caused a ton of developments. And then you had a temporary restraining order that basically said only people who had local, or I can't remember exactly what the ruling was, but basically if you had a separate individual decision, you could play if you had and get an extra year of eligibility. And the reason why I'm asking all this is because when this took place and when this happened, you had a ton of news about players who were in NFL training camps and on NFL teams rosters who were coming back to college so that they could get another year playing with NIL. And one of the biggest ones that made the most waves was LSU, because they had a couple of players from NFL teams that were coming back to join them that actually were transfer portals after the fact. So that was one of the reasons why this was taking place. And I'm asking all this because, look, the SEC and the Big Ten have made a rule where if you are on if you basically saying that the previous rules of if you sign with an NFL team, if you don't properly exit the NFL draft like you're supposed to, then you're not going to play. So that's kind of taking some of this and making some of this point moot. But I think it's still a valid question because, people ask, are college sports doomed? The way that we know it, are college sports doomed? And I'll just go ahead and tell you this much. Yes, they are. The way that what we know and what we have always thought of as college sports, those days are done. And it's one of the reasons why it's harder to follow college sports. It's one of the reasons why I don't spend quite as much time talking and blogging about Mississippi State, is because it's really difficult to know who is on this team. If you don't follow them, if you don't follow every single move that is made, you don't know. Most years, I can tell you, most years prior to like 2020, I could have told you who the starting lineup was, who the starting offensive line was, who the starting defensive line was, who the linebackers were. And for the most part, I still can't. But when it comes to like the offensive line, I don't know all the offensive linemen. I just know that they're not good anymore. And maybe they're better this year. I still know some of the stars. I know who those guys are. I know the main skills set guys. I know those players. But because there is so much movement, because there is so much team swapping nowadays, I don't know who all is going to be on this team. I just kind of learn it as we go throughout the year. And it will be that way with basketball. It'll be that way with baseball. And college sports, look, they're not what they once were. They're not. And I do hate that part of it. I truly do. I hate the fact that I can't really look at the team from last year and tell you just how good or how good they won't be based off of that roster, because how many of those guys are coming back? I'm not 100% positive. But I will also say this. It's what needed to happen, because it's not really fair for college players to not get any money that comes into the schools and not be able to profit off of that. It's just not fair. And both things can be true. Yes, NIL, transfer portal, has made college sports worse. But it's also true that players deserve to get a piece of that income, because they are the main reason why that income is being generated. And look, I don't know what the solution is. The solution is collective bargaining. That's just really what it is. But will we ever get that? I don't know, because then if you get collective bargaining, schools have to admit that they're not students and that they have employees on their field. And like I said, I don't know the solution to this. The solution is something that the schools will never ever want to do, and basically admit that they need collective bargaining. So I don't know if that's ever going to happen. And it's just a tough place to be if you're a college football fan or a college sports fan of any kind, because it's hard to keep up with the players. And if you're a team like Mississippi State, and I don't agree with this, because every time we have a player who does anything really well, we're like, oh, well, we're just going to lose him at the end of the year. Look, we didn't lose Kamario Taylor. He's still there. We've got players still on our roster that are good players, and they didn't opt to leave and look out for greener pastures. Some do. Yeah, that happens. There's no question about that. Some will do that, but not all of them will. I mean, Josh Hubbard could have left every single year if he wanted to try to find a better place to play and possibly make more money. He didn't do it. So it's not always going to happen, but it will happen sometimes. And you just kind of have to hope and pray that they can figure this issue out. But you know what? I don't have a whole lot of confidence that they will. It makes it hard to be a fan of college sports. It really does. But I hope and pray that they'll get this figured out, and maybe we'll figure out some way to do some collective bargaining, and make some rules around things, and maybe get some of the chaos that happens at the end of every season, get it under control, and be better off in the long run, because that's the only way this is going to get better. And it's the only way that I think that we can kind of really get a reconnect to our favorite teams. And that's an important part of this, because the reason why so many of us are fans of college sports, and the reason why we are fans of the teams that we are, is because we have personal connections to these schools. I'm a Mississippi State grad. I graduated in December of 2001. I have vivid memories and vivid recollections of my time there at Mississippi State, and why that is important to me. So, and that's the connection that so many of us have to the schools and the teams that we root for. Is there's something. It's not just it's a team that plays in our city. There's a real I'm a part of Mississippi State. Mississippi State is a part of me because of the fact that I have a degree from them, and that makes college just a little bit different. So, like I said, I hope they get it straightened out. I hope they get these things resolved. And if they don't, look, college sports will continue to go on. It's just the connection that we have to it may not be quite as strong as it once was, because with the revolving door that is the NIL and transfer portal, it makes it harder. It just does. So. Let's get back into the entertainment world. I want to go ahead and talk about a movie that's basically a month old at this point, but that's Spider-Man Brand New Day. I never got a chance to talk about it on Reel to Reel because I had some things come up and never got a chance to record about it over there, but I want to talk about it here. Look, it's easily in my top 3. It might be in my top 2, and it might be my top Spider-Man movie. That's the only ones it's competing with are the original Sam Raimi films, the first 2, Spider-Man and then Spider-Man 2. They're the only ones that have any chance of dethroning this. This is by far my favorite Tom Holland film. Of all 4 of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, this one is my favorite. I thoroughly enjoyed this. My son and I went and saw it when it first came out, and this movie is just absolutely remarkable. It's breaking box office records. It's making a ton of money. It's just a phenomenal film, and I was just thoroughly, I loved everything about it. The reason why I like this film so much, look, Spider-Man is my favorite Marvel character. He's really my favorite comic book character. And the previous Spider-Man films have not even broken into my top 10 of MCU movies. No Way Home came close, but it never quite got there for me. This one just definitely is. It's one of my favorite MCU films. I don't know exactly where. I haven't placed it just anywhere at this point, but the reason why I haven't just really connected with the Spider-Man films is the reason why a lot of people haven't, is because we really never got a true Spider-Man story in those first three films. It wasn't the Spider-Man, it wasn't the Peter Parker that most of us were aware of or had grown up with, a guy who was struggling just to kind of get by, who was very much on his own, who understood just how crucial it was to keep his identity secret, all this type of stuff. And that's the reason why, as much as I thought Tom Holland was really good as Peter Parker, and why I thought he really did a great job of playing that character, I just never really thought that those stories were what I wanted out of a Spider-Man story. And this one got it back to that level. This is Peter Parker struggling to make it day to day. He has no one out there helping him. He has no one out there supporting him. It's just him. Everybody has forgotten who he is based off of No Way Home, and he doesn't have any way to get that support from people. And in this film, we get back to that. Like, we get a true Peter Parker story, and that's why this film works just so incredibly well. That's the main reason why. Look, it helps that Sadie Sink is just absolutely incredible as Jean Grey. I'm not really sure I like as dark as they go with Jean Grey. I don't mind them going dark with her, but they went a little, they did go a little far dark with her killing quite a few people. But I thought she was just absolutely incredible as Jean Grey. I think she's going to be phenomenal going forward into the X-Men films. Really looking forward to that. But she's just great. Tom Holland is spectacular. The Punisher, a hero, a Marvel hero I do not like. I'll be real honest with you. I've never enjoyed the Punisher. I just don't resonate with that story any. John Bernthal was fantastic as the Punisher in this film. It's just a great film. I mean, there's so much to enjoy about this version of the Spider-Man franchise, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with the character going forward. And we probably have 2 more films with Tom Holland as Peter Parker before he either turns it over to somebody else, or they introduce Miles Morales as the permanent MCU Spider-Man. But I'm really looking forward to what they do with this character in Tom Holland's reigning time as Spider-Man going forward, because this was just absolutely phenomenal. Like I said, I thought it was great. The MCU has gotten banged on so much here recently, and I think their last 3 entries have just been absolutely great. Talking about Thunderbolts, the Fantastic Four, and now Spider-Man Brand New Day. They've been wonderful films, and look, the previous 2, Fantastic Four and Thunderbolts, were not as commercially successful as I know that they wanted to be. Definitely Thunderbolts. Fantastic Four was a little bit better off, but like I said, I'm just really excited about what they've done here, and I'm hoping that they can continue to build on this momentum, let Tom Holland continue to cook, and let Sadie Sink continue to do what she did in this film as well, because when I was watching the Stranger Things television show, you know, you start to look at those kids and you start to say, who could be the breakout stars? And a lot of people obviously thought that Wolf Flinhard, or Flynn Wolfhard, I can't remember how to get the kid's name. They thought he would probably be the most likely to, because he was kind of the lead in that first season. But Sadie Sink stood out, and from season 2 on, she stood out so many times, and she carried that show a lot of times, and that she was always my biggest bet to hit it big after her time in Stranger Things was done. Obviously, I think Maya Hawke will do the same thing as well, but she's a little bit more established going into that show than the rest of them were. But I'm really excited about what she's going to do and see how she can really propel her career forward in this role as Jean Grey as they get ready to make the X-Men film coming in 2028, I think is when it's coming out. So, like I said, really excited about it. Can't wait to see what they do. want to spend a ton of time on this. I do want to spend a little bit on House of the Dragon Season 3 that wrapped up a couple weeks ago, because I really enjoyed this season. The first two seasons I thought were good, but I don't think they really lived up to what Game of Thrones was, especially in those first like 4 or 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, maybe the first 6. And that was always, the concern coming into this. Are people still going to want this show? And I don't know that. I think most people, it had great viewership numbers, and it did really well, but I'm not really sure that it quite resonated with people as much as they wanted it to. This season, I think they really did. I think this season got back to what made Game of Thrones one of the best shows on television when it was airing. And I think this season really did. It's, Rhaenyra and Alicent are the heart of that story, but you really got some great performances by Ormond. He was fantastic. And honestly, the thing that excites me the most is Benjamin. Oh, I can't remember the kid's name. The kid who played Darren. Like I said, I can't remember his name, but he's going to be playing Link in next year's, in 2027's Legend of Zelda movie. And as a guy who has played almost all of the Legend of Zelda games, the Zelda games are my favorite. I'm really excited because he was fantastic as Darren. He was one of the best parts of Season 3, and he's going to be playing the part of Link in next year's movie. So I'm really excited about that. He's got me really excited about what's the potential of what that film could be. If he can kind of carry what he did in House of the Dragon Season 3 over to the Legend of Zelda film, that should just be an absolutely phenomenal film. So there's a lot of reasons for me to be excited about that. But there was so many just great performances. Aegon was fantastic. He was just absolutely amazing. Matt Smith as Daemon Targaryen is fantastic as always. But obviously, like I said, Alicent and Rhaenyra are the reasons why this show, when they are together, when they're working together, this show just really takes off and finds their level. Emma Darcy just owns the screen whenever she is on. Well, actually, I got to refer to her as they. Whenever they are on the screen as Rhaenyra, and it's just a fantastic performance. I love what they did with this season. I think they set themselves up for a phenomenal finale season coming up in probably a couple of years. But like I said, I want to just talk about it a little bit. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it because it's 2 weeks old and a lot of people have kind of moved on. But I did. I love this season. I thought it was great. I think we got a chance to have a really phenomenal 4th season. Hoping they can kind of finish this thing off strong, and where they go from there, I don't know. But we also have Night of the Seven Kingdoms as well, so that's going to be, if you're still a Game of Thrones fan, that one I really suggest. That first season was fantastic. So, but yeah, like I said, want to talk about it a little bit, but didn't want to spend a ton of time on it. So there's my thoughts. Thing I want to talk about, that is the first 2 episodes of Lanterns. This is the newest show on Sunday nights on HBO. And I'll be real honest, again, this is something I've loved. I thought these first 2 episodes were spectacular. Kyle Chandler as the choice of Hal Jordan, I was very curious about that when they first announced it. But what they have done with him by making him an older Hal Jordan and making him a more cynical, a more jaded Hal Jordan, I think has worked just fantastic in these first 2 episodes, and I'm very interested to see where they go from it. And there will be spoilers for this, so if you haven't seen the first 2 episodes, you might want to stop watching here. But I think he's just fantastic. The fact that that they apparently kill him off at the end of the first episode, I think is a really fascinating decision, because because Hal Jordan is what most people think of when they think of Green Lantern, at least. Well, I'll say this. It's what most people who are like my age will think of when they think of the Green Lantern. Now, if you're probably, 10, 15 years younger, you might have watched the cartoon that they used, and they had John Stewart as the primary Green Lantern. If that's the case, then you might be more familiar with John Stewart as the Green Lantern. But like I said, most people my age, when they think Green Lantern, they think Hal Jordan. And to kill him, apparently, I'll say apparently, because who knows where they will go with that story. But to kill him off at the very end of that first episode in the 2026 timeline, it's an interesting choice, because like I said, that will anger some people. Look, there are some people who don't like this show, and I get it because they haven't gotten really deep into the lanterning of the whole lantern part of it. They haven't used the rings to create a lot of constructs and all that kind of stuff. And so I get it. If you're not connecting with it because it's not quite as comic booky as you would like it to be, I can get that. But I think they will get there. I think they realized that this was going to be a Sunday night HBO show, and they didn't want to alienate the people who weren't comic book fans, the people who weren't as familiar with the comic book source material. I think they wanted to, give those people some room to kind of get into this show and to enjoy it as well, and they'll start introducing more comic booky stuff later on as we get into this thing. I think that's going to end up being the case. I can't say that for certain, but I really do feel pretty confident about that. But the show has two guys in the lead who are just really good together, really good on their own, with Aaron Pierre and Kyle Chandler. They have great chemistry. They are just electric whenever the two of them are on screen together, interacting with one another. We've got a great little mystery storyline with the whole Manhunter storyline and who is the Manhunter. That much I don't really care about that much. I think it's interesting, but just watching those two guys work together, the dynamic they have, the buddy cop, good cop, bad cop. I'm not really sure which of those tropes it would be. Maybe a little bit of both, but they have something that works really well with those two gentlemen on the screen, and I just think it's just an absolutely phenomenal series so far. Look, we got 6 more episodes, and it could go downhill. So but these first 2 episodes I think have just been great, and they're hinting at some interesting things. Look, if you don't know the story behind Jon Stewart, I don't know a ton about Jon Stewart because, like I said, the guy who I grew up with as Green Lantern was Hal Jordan, and I didn't watch that cartoon. I do know a little bit about him. And if they're setting up what I think they're setting up, and I'm not going to spoil it here, because if you're not familiar with Jon Stewart, then I don't want to spoil that. But that's going to be a very interesting thing that they explore in a potential road that they go down. So, like I said, I'm very interested where they go with it. And I want to talk about that, but I want to wait until they give more in the show about what they could potentially be doing with the character of Jon Stewart, because he's one of the more fascinating Green Lanterns because of just the way that he operates versus all the other Green Lanterns. I'll be very interested to see if they pull other lanterns into this. There's lots of different lanterns out there. There's a pink lantern. There's orange lanterns. I think it's orange. There's one orange lantern, excuse me. There is black lanterns. There's white lanterns. There's blue lanterns. Like I said, I'll be very interested if they pull some of those other colors into this show. I don't think they'll pull it into this show, but if they eventually use them later on down the road, that's something that would be fun and a lot of things that they could do with those different lanterns that are out there if they want to pull them into the show. I know a lot of people have bumped up against, like I said, the comic book part of this. A lot of people are, if you're just a comic diehard, some people aren't really jiving with this for one of the reasons why that people aren't just connecting with the show, and I get that. So, but I'm not one of those people. But anyway, like I said, looking forward to seeing what they do with the rest of the show. I've enjoyed these first 2 episodes, so we'll see what they can do going forward. So, all right, guys, appreciate you guys coming back. I'm looking forward to doing this more, and we will see you then. And until next time, Hail State, and see you at the movies.